He did not dance that evening, while the entire ballroom watched her laugh in another man's arms. And by the time the music stopped, the Duke had already decided something that would leave every noble in the room questioning what they had just witnessed and what it would cost them. The night had begun like all such nights did, wrapped in ceremony and expectation. The grand hall of Ravensshire House illuminated by chandeliers that cast a golden glow across polished marble floors, where every step, every glance, every whispered word carried weight. Nobles gathered in carefully arranged clusters, alliances hidden beneath pleasantries, ambition dressed as charm, and at the center of it all was a single, unspoken understanding. The Duke would choose someone to dance. He always did eventually, though never quickly, never carelessly. And yet tonight, from the moment he entered, something was different. He did not move toward the dance floor. He did not acknowledge the hopeful curtsies offered in his direction. Instead, he stopped just inside the room, his presence alone enough to shift the rhythm of the evening, his silence more commanding than any announcement. Conversation softened, attention tilted, and still he did nothing. Nothing, except look. At first, no one followed his gaze. They assumed, as they always did, that his disinterest was simply another expression of his well-known restraint. But then the music swelled, the dancers parted, and the truth revealed itself in the most unexpected place. There, caught in the turning light of the chandeliers, was Elena Marlowe, her hand resting lightly in the grip of Lord Adrian, the Duke's cousin. She moved with a grace that seemed almost defiant against the quiet reputation that followed her name, a reputation built not on scandal, but on absence. Absence of favor, absence of protection, absence of belonging. She was tolerated, invited only because excluding her outright would have drawn more attention than including her quietly. And yet tonight, she did not look like someone who had been pushed to the edges of society. She looked alive. She laughed as Adrian spun her, her expression unguarded in a way that made it impossible not to notice her. And perhaps that was the first mistake, because the Duke noticed everything. He watched the way Adrian leaned closer than necessary, the ease in his posture, the way the room welcomed him without question. Adrian had always been that way. Effortless where the Duke was deliberate, warm where he was reserved, admired in ways that required no effort at all. And under any other circumstance, the Duke might not have cared. But this was not another circumstance. Not tonight. Not with her. Time seemed to slow in ways no one could explain. The dance continued. The music played. Laughter rose and fell. But beneath it all, something subtle and sharp had begun to form, like tension in a string pulled too tight. The Duke did not move. Not when one lady after another approached, only to leave quietly disappointed. Not when murmurs began to ripple through the edges of the room. And certainly not when Adrian lifted Elena's hand just slightly higher, guiding her into a turn that drew a small round of applause from nearby onlookers. It was a harmless gesture, admired even, but it lingered just long enough to feel like something more. Elena, for her part, seemed unaware of the shift unfolding beyond the dance. Or perhaps she chose not to see it. For one fleeting moment, she allowed herself to exist without caution, without calculation, as if she could forget that every eye in that room was capable of remembering her place the moment the music stopped. But the Duke did not forget. He could not, because where others saw a dance, he saw something else entirely. Something misplaced, something unbalanced, something that did not align with the order he had long maintained without question. And the longer he stood there, the clearer it became that he was not simply observing. He was deciding. The final notes of the waltz approached, the orchestra, building toward its conclusion, and still he had not moved. Around him, anticipation shifted into something more uncertain. This was not how the evening was meant to unfold. He was meant to step forward, to choose, to participate in the quiet rituals that kept everything predictable. But instead, he remained still, his gaze unwavering, fixed on the one person in the room who had never once expected to be noticed by him. And when the music finally ended, when applause filled the space and Adrian bowed with his usual effortless charm, there was a pause, a fraction of a second where nothing quite aligned the way it should. Because Elena smiled. Not the careful, measured smile she wore in polite company, but something softer, something real. And in that moment, before anyone else could speak, before the next dance could begin, before the rhythm of the evening could recover, The Duke shifted his stance ever so slightly. It was a small movement, almost nothing, but those closest to him felt it instantly, like the air itself had changed direction. Because whatever decision he had made in silence, it had just been set into motion, and everyone in that ballroom, whether they understood it yet or not, was about to feel the consequences. The applause had barely faded when the shift began, subtle, but unmistakable, like a quiet tension slipping into the air before anyone could name it. Elena lowered her gaze as she completed her curtsy, her breath still unsteady, her pulse caught between the lightness of the dance and the sudden awareness that too many eyes had been watching. Around her, the ballroom attempted to return to normal. Conversations resumed, musicians prepared for the next piece, but something was off. Because across the room, the Duke had not moved. And now, people had begun to notice where he was looking. Adrian, still smiling with effortless confidence, leaned closer as if nothing had changed. "You see," he said lightly. "Not so terrible after all." Elena managed a small reply, but her attention had already shifted, drawn by something she could not ignore, the weight of a presence approaching. Adrian extended his hand again. "Another dance?" he asked, certain of the answer. And for the briefest moment, Elena hesitated. It was slight, nearly invisible, but it was there, and it was enough. Because at that exact moment, the Duke stepped forward. He did not rush. He did not call attention to himself. Yet the effect rippled instantly through the room. Conversations faltered, the musicians faltered with them, and a silence began to form as he crossed the floor with quiet, deliberate purpose. Adrian noticed too late. His hand was still extended when the Duke came to a stop before them, his presence cutting cleanly through the moment. "Cousin," Adrian said, his tone still light, though less certain now. "Have you decided to join us?" The Duke did not answer immediately. His gaze rested on Elena, steady and unreadable, as though Adrian's words were secondary to something else entirely. "You seem engaged," he said at last. The word landed softly, but it carried something sharper beneath it. Adrian gave a small laugh, trying to recover the ease slipping from his grasp. "It is a ball. Engagement is the purpose." Still, the Duke did not look at him. And that, more than anything, unsettled the moment. Elena felt it fully now, the weight of attention, of being seen not as an afterthought, but as something deliberate. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, resisting the instinct to step back. "You danced well," the Duke said then, his voice directed only at her. The simplicity of it caught her off guard. "Thank you, Your Grace," she answered softly. Adrian's smile tightened. "Then perhaps she will honor me with another," he said, reaching again for her hand, this time more deliberately. But the Duke moved first. Not abruptly, not improperly, but with unmistakable intent. His hand intercepted the space between them, not touching, but stopping the gesture entirely. "No," he said. Quiet. Final. Adrian stilled. "No," he echoed, disbelief flickering across his face. Only then did the Duke look at him, and whatever passed in that brief glance was enough. Enough to make Adrian step back. The room fell into a deeper silence, one that pressed in from all sides, as every noble present understood that something irreversible had just occurred. Elena stood frozen in the center of it, her heart racing, her thoughts scattered between caution and something she could not yet define. Then the Duke turned back to her, the tension in his expression shifting into something more focused, more deliberate. "You will dance again," he said. Not a question. Elena hesitated, every instinct reminding her what it meant to be seen like this, to be placed at the center of attention she had spent her life avoiding. "If it pleases Your Grace," she replied carefully. A faint pause followed. "It does." He extended his hand. No flourish, no charm, just certainty. And slowly, she placed her hand in his. The moment she did, the room changed again, not loudly, but undeniably. Because this was no longer about a dance. It was about what it meant. The musicians began to play once more, softer now, as if aware they were witnessing something rather than entertaining it. The Duke stepped closer, his movements precise, controlled, but intentional in a way that left no doubt. And as they began to move across the floor, it became clear to everyone watching that he had not refused to dance that evening out of indifference. He had simply been waiting, for the moment, for the reason, and for her. The music came to an end far too soon for anyone in the room to fully understand what they had just witnessed, and yet long enough for every person present to realize nothing would return to what it had been before. The final note lingered in the air as the Duke and Elena stood at the center of the ballroom, their hands still joined for a fraction longer than propriety required. No one spoke. No one dared. Because the silence now was no longer uncertain, it was expectant. The Duke released her slowly, his gaze never leaving hers, as if sealing something unspoken between them, something the rest of the room was not meant to fully understand. Elena felt it too, that shift beneath the surface, as though the world had tilted ever so slightly, and she had been placed somewhere she had no right to stand. She stepped back, instinct urging her to disappear, to retreat into the safety she had always known, but it was already too late. Every eye followed her. Every whisper waited. And then the Duke did what no one had anticipated. He did not turn away. He did not return to the edges of the room or resume his silence. Instead, he stepped forward once more, not toward her this time, but toward the room itself, as if finally acknowledging the audience that had watched every moment unfold. "Miss Marlowe," he said, his voice calm, steady, carrying effortlessly across the hall, "will not be overlooked again." It was not loud. It did not need to be. The weight of it settled instantly, heavy and undeniable, leaving no space for interpretation. A statement, a decision, a line drawn in full view of everyone who mattered. A murmur threatened to rise, but died before it could take shape. Because no one present was foolish enough to challenge him. No one dared question what he had just done, not when the meaning was so clear. Elena stood frozen, her breath catching as the reality of it reached her all at once. Not just the dance, not just the attention, but the consequence of it. This was not kindness. This was not a passing gesture. This was something far more dangerous. The Duke turned back to her then, and for the briefest moment, the distance between them felt smaller than it should have. "You may go," he said quietly, though there was nothing dismissive in it. It was permission, protection, perhaps even something more. She managed a small nod, her composure fragile but holding, and turned to leave the center of the room. But this time, the path cleared for her, not out of indifference, but out of recognition. Heads inclined, eyes lowered. Space was given where it had never been before, and she understood, with a clarity that both steadied and unsettled her, that the world she had known had shifted permanently in a single evening. Behind her, the Duke did not watch her go, or perhaps he did, but no one would dare say so. He simply turned, offering nothing further, no explanation, no justification, as though what he had done required none. The orchestra, hesitant at first, began to play again. Conversations resumed. Laughter returned, softer now, edged with something cautious. But beneath it all, the memory of that moment lingered, unshakable, because he had not danced that evening until he chose her. And in doing so, he had not only changed the course of the night, he had rewritten her place within it forever.